Kristen, our director.
Okay, great. So I'll just talk just for like 5 minutes because most of you do know some things about the project, but just really quickly to talk about Measure of America and what we do. So we're a project of the nonpartisan nonprofit Social Science Research Council. And what we do is we use a tool used around the world as a way to understand and measure progress, the Human Development Approach and the Human Development Index. And we also use other data sets that focus on well-being and opportunity in America. And yeah, you guys can read there, but we do try to breathe life into numbers and really emphasize that we believe in an America where everybody counts. Can't resist that pun. So our conceptual framework is human development. Human development is about the real freedom people have to decide how to live their lives, who to be and what to do and how to live. So the traditional approach to measuring progress is asking this question, which is how is the economy doing? And Measure of America's approach is to ask, how are people doing? It's a very broad concept. It includes all the things that all the capabilities one requires to live a freely chosen, flourishing life. So things from your religious beliefs to your community bonds, your safety in your community, your relationships and everything. So all those things are part of human development and expanding people's choices and opportunities. It's impossible to measure all those things at once. So the human development approach, which was developed, by the way, at the United Nations, measures just 3 areas that are kind of the fundamental building blocks of a life of choice and value: a long and healthy life, access to knowledge, and a decent standard of living. What we do is we have all of these indicators here: life expectancy at birth, which we calculate using mortality data; access to knowledge. These indicators come from the American Community Survey; and a decent standard of living, which is median personal earnings, is the proxy, also from the American Community Survey. So we take these 3 things together, we put them on the same scale, and we add them together, divide by 3, and we get the Human Development Index score, which falls on the scale from 0 to 10. So all of our work features this American Human Development Index. It's on our data tools, it's in our reports, and it's kind of a consistent way we use to assess how different groups are doing in relation to one another in terms of well-being and access to opportunity. So we've done a lot of work in New York City. So I'll just touch quickly on the different things we have for New York. First, we have Data2go.NYC, which you guys all know about because you've been using it today and probably during the week. This tool has hundreds of indicators that are all mashed into the same geographies. So we have data from like the police department and the fire department, but rather than showing it by, say, precinct or what is the fire department unit of analysis? Anyway, instead of doing it, we put it all to census tracts and community districts. So that makes it easier for people who are doing fundraising or trying to find out about their community to have everything in a comparable form. We also have a report from 2018, a portrait of New York City. So that is, again, a report. You can get it online. I think we might still have copies in the office if you want them. And basically what we did there is we applied the Human Development Index both to the metro area and also to just New York City. And we see, using this index, you're probably not surprised to see a resident of the Upper East Side at the top. But it's the distance in fundamental areas of life is pretty shocking. So a resident of the Upper East Side can expect to live 14 years longer than a resident of Southwest Newark, 6 times as likely to have a bachelor's degree, and has median personal earnings of about $50,000 more. And again, the median is the middle point in the income distribution. So averages, of course, are higher than this in general. We also have Data2go Health. So Data2go Health is optimized for your cellular, your mobile device. And it also has hundreds of indicators focusing on health. For this one, rather than everything being the same geography, it's the lowest possible geography is the way it's organized, the most granular geography. And this is how it looks. And again, it's hundreds of indicators that look this way. Then we have ourhome.nyc. This is similar to Data2go and to Data2go Health, but it focuses on New York City public housing developments. So we have scores for all the census tracts that have NYCHA housing developments in them. And it features these life expectancy at birth calculations from the CDC, as well as lots of other indicators as well. So, we make these projects for New York, but also for the whole country. So we have kind of 3 areas of work. We have reports like the Portrait of New York. We have data tools like Data2go.NYC. We do a lot of work on youth disconnection. We do commissioned work. And these are basically some of the things that we've learned about using data for change. The first is that it's really important to have meaningful and actual participation of partners on the ground rather than just kind of cosmetic participation, because that gives people confidence in the data. They understand what it is and what we're collecting. And it also makes sure that we're focusing on the right kinds of issues. If we're collecting data that no one cares about, it's not very worthwhile. We try to find ways to bring the voices of people who have all kinds of expertise, lived experience, and listen to what they say. We always try to present information in different ways. Some people will see a spreadsheet and think, oh, cool, a spreadsheet. And other people will see a spreadsheet and just start to cry. So we try to recognize that some people need to hear stories. Some people want maps and visuals. Other people want to have spreadsheets and so forth. Some people want a narrative. So we try to give all of those different ways of explaining and presenting data. Numbers don't tell the story by themselves. When we first started Measure of America, we thought, okay, cool, we'll just put data out there and something magical will happen, and then there will be social change. And we realized that middle part, something magical will happen, doesn't actually happen that way. So you really have to help numbers tell their story. You have to provide a narrative for what's happening, or people will kind of interpret it their own way, which could be right or wrong. We are data focused and we are a nonpartisan project, but that doesn't mean that we don't have values. So the Human Development Framework is a value-based framework that puts people at the center and values the dignity of every person and the idea that everyone has the same right to live a flourishing, freely chosen life. And being independent is always very, very important for people to believe what we say and trust the numbers we present. So thank you. That's us in a nutshell, Measure of America. And does anybody have any questions?
Thank you so much, Kristen. And with that, I will pass it over to Liam to talk more about Open Data Week and the Open Data program.
Thanks, Rubén, and thanks, Kristen. Just before I'll just talk about a couple of additional tools that'll allow you to sort of dig into New York City data. But just want to emphasize, I spent a lot of today playing around with the Data2go tool, and just like want to remark that I found it to be really intuitive, easy to use. And I think that's an important thing when you're trying to, like you said, tell stories with numbers and really engage with the data. Maybe if you're not a quote unquote data person or you don't see yourself as such. So I want to say that's a great tool. Just want to talk a little bit about the New York City Open Data Portal itself. New York City Open Data Portal now hosts over 3,000 data sets about the operations of New York City. There are data sets on almost every topic imaginable, from streets and buildings to taxis and trees. There's even a data set on squirrels in the city, which is definitely one of my favorite. And so on that link I shared, you can type in keywords and search any topic that you're curious about. There are also some tools on there that allow you to visualize data, filter data, and do some explorations, drill down a little bit that way. A little bit more about Open Data Week. I think many of you are aware, but it's a festival co-organized by my office at the Mayor's Office of Data Analytics, along with BetaNYC and Data2go Design, as I mentioned. And it's basically a yearly festival to celebrate the passage of Local Law 11 of 2012, aka the Open Data Law, which was passed on March 7th of 2012. So we just passed, I guess, the 9-year anniversary of that. So we're really excited that you all are here today to take part in that sort of anniversary celebration. Yeah, and that's about it for me. I'll kick it back over to Rubén. Thanks again so much for having me.
Thank you, Liam, and thank you to the Mayor of Data Analytics, Mayor's Office of Data Analytics and BetaNYC for making Open Data Week possible. And I believe I will pass it over to Laura Laderman, our manager of data and visualization, to talk a little bit about moving data to action.
So we're going to talk very briefly about how to use data for advocacy and for change making, which a lot of you guys have been doing this week through the scavenger hunt. And I know that many of you have used Data2go before, so this is maybe very familiar to you. And we'll just give you a few different tips and tricks that we all saw this week. The data is really good for finding out something about the city that you might not have known. It's good for looking at something from a different perspective. Something that can go wrong, Elsa, correct, is what the difference between correlation and causation. People might make assumptions that something is the way it is because of something else, when maybe that isn't the case. Oftentimes, I think when people talk about data, they like give people like 10 gajillion numbers and their eyes glaze over. Yeah, exactly. Data talk can go wrong when people don't pay attention to the nuance and the details. So there might be specifics to how the data is collected that you need to know about, that kind of stuff. Exactly. All of these things are super important when you think about starting to use data to explain something or to make a case for something, maybe to share to your representatives that we should do this because of that. And so some of the questions that I think are really important to ask up front are, who is your audience? What is the story you're trying to tell? And what does the data say? So really important to think about who you're speaking to, what level of background they might have with data, what their own experience is with this topic. Oftentimes we might be presenting to a community data about their own community, and that's really important to think about what people's experiences might be and how they might receive that data. All those things are good questions. So I'm just going to speak super briefly about framing, because I think that one of the most important things when talking about data is to frame it. And there's this organization called the Frameworks Institute that has done a ton of research on what are some of the best ways to convince people or to share information about particular topics. And they have some really good information about using data when advocating for whatever issue you're working on. So they have this nice line that says, don't leave the data to speak for itself, which I think is kind of fun. You don't just want the data to like be out there to live on its own. You got to help interpret it and explain it. So just a few bullet points of their overview is that you want to select relevant data. So choose data that supports an understanding of the scope and scale of a problem or of the efficacy of solutions, helping people to understand what's going on, how big it is, and also like we can make a change. You want to make sure that your data points don't cue fatalistic thinking. I think oftentimes people use data to be like, this problem is so humongous. Look how humongous it is. We clearly need to address it. But the way that our brains work, we often become fatalistic when we hear things like that. So we'll say, oh, this problem is so huge. How could we ever solve it? We better not even try. It's not worth it. So there's a couple examples here of how to maybe think about that. Help your audience interpret the significance of your data by putting it into perspective, using analogies and comparisons. Sometimes those big numbers, you're like, I don't know what $2 billion is. Like, what is that? And then provide meaning first and use the numbers to support that meaning. So I'll just go through a couple of quick examples. So for example, here they have something that you might be giving testimony, say, about budget cuts, and you say 285 million in cuts to healthcare and education as proposed in the last state budget would cause as many as 10,000 jobs to be lost. Okay, that seems great. Seems like we're making a good case, but it's even stronger if you have some sort of analogy, like that these 10,000 jobs lost is equivalent to our state's largest private employer laying off a full half of its workers. So helping people to understand what those numbers mean. Another example is here, you might be trying to explain how the tax system works and the growing income inequality. And I'm not even going to read this thing, but you can see that it has a lot of numbers in it. You might be like, yes, this is how I'm going to make my case with all these numbers. In 2005, the wealthiest 1% of taxpayers, those with household incomes over 350,000, 742, I can't even say the numbers. There's so many of them there. So they're suggesting that, maybe sometimes the best way to work with numbers is to not even include the numbers at all, but to explain what they mean, right? So to share with people, we're trying to do this thing together, right? We need to have funding in order to have all these great things that we want, but the system is increasingly regressive, meaning that wealthier people pay a lesser share of their income in taxes than average citizens, right? You can understand that in a way that maybe you couldn't understand all those numbers in that previous paragraph. Maybe you want to throw in one specific number in here, but sometimes it's important to think about, do I need the numbers or do I just need to explain what they say? Here's just another quick example of how to, from an example about giving legislative testimony that is again about giving an explanation of, why we need this and what it means in an analogy. So often when you're using data, you really want to combine it with some stories, right, of the people that are represented within that data. It makes it much more personal and really brings it down to earth for people to understand what do these numbers mean? So a lot of you shared really great things on your scavenger hunts, like stuff about education funding and about parks. And it was really cool to see some of the organizations that you pulled out or pictures that you had. And those are all really great ways to combine data with something a little more personal and makes a case for whatever you're trying to do. So just wanted to share a couple of snippets of different ways to do this. Some of them are from this community portraits program that we did, which Canva you actually participated in, and have a really great infographic from that. I'm just going to show a really quick video that I kind of like, that I think is a creative way of combining data with a person's experience. It's from the Coalition of Asian American Children and Families. They were doing a campaign about about exercise and healthy community planning in order to create ways for people to exercise more. So let's just watch this video very briefly. There's no sound, so you don't need to worry that you're missing the sound. I kind of like that one just because it's only one data point, right? It only tells you that there's whatever 30% of people who haven't exercised, but it really shows you viscerally why that might be true, combines that data point with somebody's experience. It really makes a case that we need bike lanes so that the bikes are not going to run over your grandma while she's walking down the street. So it's just a kind of fun, different way of thinking about something. I'm going to skip this other longer video. This one by Brooklyn Community Services I really love, but you can check out all these different community portraits on the community portraits. Another way that Data2go is often used is in journalism and in news stories. So just one example of how you might think about using data if you're being asked to comment on a news story or being interviewed for a news story. We did a story with Brooklyn Eagle about the demographics of community boards and how they compare to the districts that they are serving, and looked at the difference in representation. So this is another example of a way to use data to get a big picture view of what's going on in an area. And finally, we interviewed some folks who are using Data2go this summer to understand how they're using it in responding to COVID-19. So we interviewed Glenn Wolf-Eisenberg, who is the Associate Director of Community Partner Relations and Evaluation at New York Cares, which is a huge organization distributing volunteers to different parts of the city, different volunteer projects, and they're using Data2go to help them prioritize what areas of the city they want to focus their efforts on. So this is a way that a lot of nonprofits use Data2go, by combining different variables that are important for their work in order to figure out, which areas of the city really they need to be focusing their limited time and energy and resources on. So this is an interactive story that you can find if you go to Data2go. There's a few examples of how people are using it, and you can scroll through that and read it. So there's a few different ways to, when you're thinking about using data. just different ways to think about it and to make the case for whatever you're working on with some data and some stories.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Laura, for sharing your expertise and making sure that we are communicating effectively, advocating effectively using data. So I believe the time has finally come. If folks want to come off mute and give us a brief drum roll. The winner of the Data2go NYC Scavenger Hunt from Home is, moment of suspense, UCAN Van, aka the Canberra Home Base.
Yay.
Yay, thank you.
Oh, Lord have mercy.
So we will be in touch after the webinar about the donation, and we are so happy that you all have participated, and hopefully next year we will be having our scavenger hunt back in person, running around Brooklyn.
Here's your giant check.
And if everyone wants to look at Rebecca's cam, we have the giant check view.
Thank you. We appreciate you.
Yeah, great job, everyone.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thanks, Rubén.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Rubén,
Okay.
Thanks,
for organizing
everyone.
this.
Thanks, Canva. Thanks, Elsa.
Thank you so much.
Awesome work, guys. We had a lot of fun.
Thank you all. Thank you.